Recording. How's it going? It is Thursday. What's today's date? July 23rd. How's it going? Nate Mumford, Director of Sales Engineering here at RCS. Time for another questions and answers during a time of remote workflows. And we're very excited for this today. We are joined by RCS CTO Chip Jellison, who's here getting his Zeta Cloud ready to go. Chip, how's it going?
Hey, good, Nate. Good to be here.
So we're really excited for this. One of the things we've been trying to do here in our Facebook Live series is really kind of promote, obviously, remote workflows and trying to answer your questions about, how are you interpreting, the software with between G Selector, Zeta, Zeta to Go, Zeta Cloud, Revma, Acquira, all that good stuff. And we're just here to answer during these crazy times, just certain workflows, and also keep you up to speed on what we're doing here at RCS as well. And it's so great to have Chip to join us because we have that another perspective of kind of the development world of RCS and where we're taking certain products and all of that good stuff. So, yes, if you have your questions, if you have your comments for myself, for probably Chip, definitely comment below. I have my side little screen here monitoring all of those Facebook comments. If you have a certain workflow, certain questions you want identified, definitely go ahead and comment there. I'll also be checking direct messages afterwards as well. So if you have a specific question for you and your team, you can always do that too. So comment below on our feed. You can always direct message us, or there's also email live at rcsworks.com. And as always, we're doing this every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And by the way, if you have a question post this video, if you want to go back and you can't watch this, you're not live right now, but watching this at a later time, of course, you can still reach out to us and always view these videos. The high quality videos are available for you at rcsworks.com/blog, or of course our Facebook page and video section here, which all of our products are nicely organized now in their own individual playlist. So we got all the housekeeping out of the way. So Chip, I thought so for today. If you haven't watched the previous video that we did with Chip back in April, obviously a lot of things have changed between April and July, and that's why I wanted to bring Chip back in once again. A lot of stuff with Zeta Cloud, and as we said, remote workflows too. So I thought we would start this video out today, Chip, talking about where we are that's different in regards to some of our products, especially Zeta Cloud from April until now in July.
Sure. Well, I mean, you've covered quite a bit in your series, which has been fun to watch, and it's fun to also just kind of watch how the software. So we write it, put it out there, and then just sort of see you demo it. It's it kind of takes on a brand new life. We get to see it actually being used versus theoretically. But RCS is a radio company, so we kind of inject a lot of radio in there. It's not just IT guys doing stuff. As the main guy that does the UI here was a radio jock, and so he brings stuff into here, and so he's always in here tweaking things from time to time. And I think our decision years ago to sort of embrace remote work, as soon as we started working on our to go line, Acquire to go, Zeta to go, Selector to go, we just kept adding features and features in there to make it more and more useful. And so we're turning the dial on those and adding just more features. I think you've covered in Selector to go. We added clocks fairly recently this year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go tweak your clocks in Selector to go. In in inside Zeta Cloud, we've added quite a few features since the last go around. Some of them you may have demoed in your, I think it was last week you covered, or maybe the week before you covered the the new stuff that got released to deploy into production. And we just yesterday promoted what you're seeing here to our staging environment, and we've got our QA team who's going through it, and I expect we'll probably be able to push the latest of what you see to production next week. obviously we want to make sure that the new features that we put out there are, working as expected, and we haven't broken anything. So it's a pretty rapid development cycle, but still, we don't want to just, put something out there that's kind of broken. So, I mean, if you wanted to, I can kind of go through and show a few of the newer things that are, pretty nifty. And the idea is, just to keep the war on clicks ongoing. Try to be able to do things without having to click a bunch of times or dig into buried menus. And that's a double-edged sword, because the more things that you make more accessible, the more cluttered the screens can become. So
Mhm.
it's a bit of an Apple approach to try to do things that are intuitive but without a lot of UI. So we have lots of discussions about any buttons that get put on there. Do we actually need a button, or can we do it some other way? And so one of the most obvious things in the latest release, that's not in our production environment yet, but it's in our staging environment now, and we'll end up having that in production, like I said, probably next week, is this thing that's on the screen here now, which is sort of a it's a navigation aid, number one. So if you bring up, say, the library module, so that we're showing you things that are in your library that we can drag to a, just using drag and drop, drag it to the schedule. Let's say I just want to grab something out of the promo category, and I'm making a giant leap that I actually have something in the promo category, and Zoom's kind of slowing me down a little bit here. But
Mhm.
let's say I want to take this and drag it into play. I can see clearly where it's going to inject that item when I click drop, and I'm going to drop it, and it's going to drop in there. And so that makes it much easier to see where things are going to go,
Mhm.
before. And I think even in Zeta to go and Zeta, uh, we sort of highlight the thing, and you have to work out in your brain that it's going to go before, it's going to go after. And there's always some doubt. And the more you have to think when you're trying to do something fast, the more chance there is that you could do something wrong. Um, so that's why we made it easier. We've got UX experts having input into what we're doing here. So we've got some studies we've done, and so we're taking input from those and adding it, as well as our own historical experience working in studios to influence these things. So one of the other things that this navigation bar does is we can then insert things on the fly. So here I want to insert maybe an ETM, and this will grow and change and morph. And once it gets to be too many things, we'll make it easier. But right now we only have 3 things
Mhm.
that you could put in here. So it's easy to put in, but this will change over time. So if I want to put an ETM, I can say I want to put a soft ETM, but this time, boom, it'll insert in. I can insert a spot block of a certain length in there, or a comment at this point. And you might say, well, what if I want to do a voice track on the fly? Well, if you want to insert a voice track out of nothing, you can just click this insert voice track, and then it inserts the voice track position, changes the voice track editor so that you can quickly get in and start voice tracking that position. And so I'll just play along here. We'll do a song from Oasis into Rush, and we'll continue our voice track, and we'll start playing the Rush song. And just as in Zeta to Go, um, when you click next after you've saved your voice track and you want to go into the next voice track, you just click next. Um, Zeta to Go, probably in the last year or so, I think, added an option, basically as a toggle option. And so this is our flavor of that, where you can stay in this mode where I'm going from voice track to voice track, or I can change this so I can just go through and navigate through every segue and listen to the segues. And while it might seem tedious to some, there are some that are, they're that meticulous over their show, and they
Mhm.
want to hear every segue and make sure that the segues that have been set up by Zeta to Go, by Zeta Cloud, are, they sound exactly right, so that the cue points were, the segue point, for example, was set correctly in the asset. And if not, then they can either, or if they see an opportunity where they might want to change what that is, they can do that. And certainly you get out of the box a lot of that stuff happening automatically through analyzing the audio on the way in, so you don't have to manually set those things. But if somebody had the settings for the levels off a little bit, or you have a special case where you wanted to play something a little bit, more aggressively, you have that ability. So I'm just going to go back to voice track mode so I can save my voice track, and then off we go. It says, oh, you haven't saved it. Do you want to save it? Yes, I do. And then off it goes, saves the voice track, takes me to the next voice track position. And this is our dev environment. And so I'll just capture that, put it into my clipboard, and come back to that later. Excuse me.
Nice. And of course, just kind of review here in case you're just jumping in right now. Of course, you can comment. I'm monitoring the comments right now here for Chip. If you have any questions you want to ask him, kind of talking about Zeta Cloud and some of the future stuff with RCS as well. In case you're wondering here, you're looking at that this might look a little different from the last time you might have seen Zeta Cloud. Earlier, we were talking about there's 2 videos we did about last month, and I think it was last week before, in which we showcased the hotkeys. That's brand new to Zeta Cloud. And then the video, so we'll do hotkeys and voice tracking in the Zeta Cloud new features about a month ago. And then about 2 weeks ago, we did the now modules, the layouts, the floating versus docking modules, and showcasing that with a couple of different reports in there as well, too. So in case you want to check out some of those voice tracking, some of those floating or dockable modules, that's going to be in the Zeta Cloud new features video. Of course, you can always view our videos afterwards as well. So this is really cool, Chip, talking about kind of, now, one of the things that I've noticed personally, especially with Zeta Cloud, is talking about that transition. And I've been saying, phase 1 of RCS Cloud is essentially the Zeta Cloud-based disaster recovery. That was essentially phase 1, because what that works is we have our local Zeta, and then we have Zeta in the cloud, which is a separate market, if you will. Instead of thinking like East Coast, West Coast, think about going, north to the cloud, so to speak. And all of your changes, of course, audio, metadata, logs, and SQL backups are reflected and saved in Zeta Cloud, which is, again, not a VM, written on AWS, following best practices and securities and all of that good stuff. And what we're seeing now is kind of that transition, if you will, from Zeta Cloud-based disaster recovery and Zeta Cloud automation. And I'm just curious if you kind of wanted to touch base on that. And before I forget too, Jason from Bonneville's checking in. Can you run multiple instances of sequencer on cloud, or is every stream from the cloud separate? I'll let you answer that because I think I have some comments there. But
So I'm not sure I understand the question, Nate, but if the question is, can you have different outputs for a given station? That's absolutely true. So I've got a station KRPT, which is not actually a set of call letters. It's just, as you know, Nate, the code name for this project when we first started out was Raptor. So that's sort of stuck around in some of the places here. So what we have here on this one station are multiple outputs that we have. And of course, we can license you for as many players as you'd like to have. But the idea is that this one station is being put together multiple times for different outputs. So in this case, it's a 48K AAC. Could also be Opus. We can have a different output that's maybe we're doing Opus at 64. I'm just randomly picking things. And send that somewhere, or have it be operate as a server that you could pull into and then pull the audio out. So,
and just to translate here, Chip, for 1 second. So I think to answer Jason's question, then I want you to elaborate on these primary and secondary players. So essentially, you'd have a station. So the instance would be, think of the local Zeta environment. We have one database with all the stations inside of that. So that would be your kind of FM versus the HD2. And each one of those stations in the Zeta Cloud environment have their own corresponding encoder. And so what we're looking at here if you're doing that same breakdown, Jason, is on the left-hand column, we have all of our individual stations. And when we single click on that, that brings up, the course, the detail, player, live metadata, etc., of that particular station. So what Chip is showing you is between the HDs and the FMs, we can definitely isolate those, and then we can take it a step further. And what Chip is showing here is that primary player versus the backup player. And if you could, Chip, elaborate a little more on that and how some users could take those secondary players and, with the barracks boxes or the flow players, things they can do to have redundancy for their streams.
Yeah. So these what I'm showing here are all cloud-based playout. So if in our environment we have multiple, so in this case we have dev and dev 2. In production we'd have US and US 2, and those would be in two different AWS clusters. So they would be running in completely different data centers. So you might have multiple players for redundancy purposes, or you might have multiple players on behalf of different encoding and outputs. So maybe you're sending one to some aggregator that requires Opus audio, so you want to create Opus straight out of here. The other one is AAC, and you want to send it there, or different requirements that you might have for that. So it's really kind of like what is the reason why you want to do that, and that will sort of help drive how you configure it. But really the sky's the limit, because each one of these is just basically a soft instance that we're lighting up. It doesn't require anybody to go out to a computer store and buy a computer, put in a highly specialized audio card and build a station. You just decide, okay, I want this other output, and it does it. So again, I'm not sure if I've answered the question properly, but that's sort of that. And then beyond that, coming very soon, we've just finished up the requirements for it and the designs for it, and we're going to start coding it. We've got splits coming, so you could have a different commercial load going to a group of stations. So this is sort of just before targeting individual listeners, which is a streaming platform function, which we accomplished through Revma. If you have a need to take a station output and then have different traffic load on it, a la splits, as we do in Zeta, that is coming as well. So you could have a split station, which is your primary station, and then a bunch of split stations which follow that station, and then each have their own traffic load, which then go to stream encoders or a transmitter. And as you alluded to, one of those outputs, in addition to being cloud output, could be what we call an edge player. So we have we've worked with Sound 4. They were the first ones on board. I've got one over in my little rack over there on the other desk. I meant to have it up and running, but just ran out of time this morning before we started our session. So it basically runs an instance of the player inside that box. So basically, it's running the container that would run in the cloud, but it's running in that box, connecting to the internet, caching audio locally, and getting its instructions from the cloud. Obviously, if we get disconnected, we have to do something so it can freewheel for a period of time. We'll also have a sequencer able to take over and execute on the schedule if you have an extended outage. We've got all sorts of disaster recovery stuff coming on that. But the point is that the edge player can allow you to have all of your content for your station cached on the box, uncompressed. So you've got a great sounding station at the transmitter site that's using very little bandwidth once you actually get all the audio cached to it. And then you just have to maintain the audio, any updates to the audio. And then if you had any live sessions where you've got a microphone going to Zeta Cloud and you need to get that out to your various distribution points, like the cloud players and the edge player, Zeta Cloud handles all that and makes sure that the audio gets routed to the edge players as well, which is another feature that I think we covered in our last session.
And also, don't forget, there's the Sound 4 and the Omnia processing that could be done at the station level. through Zeta Cloud as
Yeah,
well.
and that's a good point. I don't know that we've really covered that all that much, have we? So let me head over to show the Sound 4 processing. Sound 4 has developed a really neat UI for this, so you can go in and fingers crossed that in the dev environment it comes up. Looks like it will, so that's good.
And while that's
But
loading up there, I'll save you answer a question from John. Thank you for checking in, John. He was asking for Zeta Cloud. Are the number of active logins licensed similar to that of Zeta to Go's seats? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's more of just emails and passwords for the login, so it behaves just slightly different. But whereas Zeta to Go has number of seats for Zeta logins, the Zeta Cloud has its own individual email and password for users. I think we're still working on how to define that, so to speak, but as of right now, we just have it's a separate email and password using Okta law authentication, right, Chip?
yeah,
Zeta
yeah,
Cloud?
exactly. It is separate logins, and we're not currently limiting the number uh, of users per station. That's not something we're measuring or limiting or anything like that at the moment. Um, you know, so Zeta to Go, because it's an extension of Zeta, is sort of like this special thing that you get to do with Zeta. And in Zeta to Go, in Zeta Cloud, it's it. That's it. It's, the users of Zeta Cloud are the users of Zeta Cloud. So it's a, it's a, it's not a licensable feature necessarily. It's part of the product.
Yeah. Sweet. Thank you, John. So we have the Sound 4 just to review here. We're using the Zeta Cloud, went to the station, went to the Sound 4 configuration. That opens up this window here.
Yep. And so you've got all the sort of dials and widgets that you'd come to expect with sound processing. And, so you can go nuts with as many of these settings as you'd like. Comes pre-baked with some presets. You can save your own presets and then apply them. One thing that we don't have at the moment is saving a preset here and getting it onto another station, but it's a very easy thing to pull off. We just haven't had the business case for it. We haven't had a user that's needed to do that just yet. I suspect that's something that we'll end up having to do here in the next probably 4 to 5 months. But it's, again, a very simple thing to implement. So that really what that'll allow you to do is, really hone what you want the thing to sound like, save it, and then apply that to a bunch of stations. And then the other thing that we can do with that is then make it sort of more of a first class citizen in the software and be able to schedule presets to be enabled during certain parts of the time. So if you're a music station that has talk, you could change the preset, um, you know, automatically. Um, and that's something that, I would envision would happen through something that I don't know that you've probably touched on. If you have, I've missed it. We have a job scheduler, and everything I'm showing here is with full admin rights to everything in Zeta Cloud. So if you're an admin for a system and you're looking at this and saying, wow, I don't want my users to have access to all of this, it is something that you can lock down with rights. So, fear not, you have controls.
Mm-hmm.
But so we've got two types of jobs in here right now. So we can reconcile our G selector schedule automatically, and we can force the system to pull. If you've got a connected G selector, we can pull the schedule in. So by default right now, a lot of these stations are just sort of unmanned. We don't really have a great need of going into the UI and looking at a schedule in the future. We just trust that the thing is going to pull the schedule in and as it needs it. And so we just kind of let that happen. But if you wanted to sort of pull the next day's schedule, so it's already in here, we do have the ability manually to do this, and this isn't a station that has that. So
And we
that
also
could be
talked about, Chip, the in the last video for the Zeta Cloud features part 2. We also talked about the emergency playlist and the fill in the tags as well. That was
oh good.
also in there. So, and just quickly to review those two things, why don't you explain it, Chip, because you might have something in there.
Sure. Yeah. So the emergency playlist is it's basically a predefined list of things, and there is actually an improvement that I think, yeah. You see, I work in two worlds. So I work in production and I work here. So I don't know. I can't remember exactly when it came out. I don't think this is in production at the moment. But you can bring up your emergency playlist. Actually, you know what? There's a better station to look at this on, as I've already clicked it.
Well,
Let
that's
me go.
loading up there too. Philip, we'll get to your question in 1 second. He had an audition question, so we'll get to that after the ETM and the fills and the emergency playlist.
Sure. So the emergency playlist, we've added a lot of management capability to that. So before, it wasn't as easy to manage this stuff. So basically, what I'm showing you is I'm going to edit this playlist, and how I created this playlist to begin with is kind of interesting, and I can kind of touch on that. But this is essentially the list of in the exact order with some links between songs, and it's not quite filled out, but you get the idea that we've got song link, song link, song link, all through the thing. And so that's a template that will get laid in as this station runs out of things to play. So it can either be an emergency playlist, which is, if it's almost like there's been some systems in the past that have evergreen material that can play so you don't have dead air. But as an engineer or a program director, you hear that it's sort of a mayday signal that something's happened on the station. You need to deal with it. So listeners still hear something, but that, oh, that's the evergreen stuff. We got to go take a look, and we can get alerts and things like that. But if you're just driving down the road in your car and you hear it, you'd know that something's going on. So it can be if something happened and you ran out of schedule and you've got nothing, it plays that. But you could also have that be your full-time programming for the station. We've got a client that has many streams that are guest DJ channels, and they basically just load up 3 hours worth of playlist with artists who have recorded voice tracks for their channel, and then it's just between it, and the sequencer just pulls that in, plays the whole thing through, gets to the end, sees it doesn't have anything, and just rinses and repeats.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the emergency playlist methodology. And then we also added ETM tags. So you've got the ability to fill based on tags. So you go in, you assign assets certain tags, and then you can, inside the playlist here, we can see that we've got all sorts of tags. So we've got a fill one, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what's in there. I'd have to go look in the library. But I can say that if we wanted to, we could put in ETM fill tags, and then it would use a G selector engine. So it's not a full-on G selector, but it's the G selector scheduling engine to decide what out of the universe of fill tags can be put into the schedule, and it will use artist title separation and really whatever else we want to add, because it is the G selector scheduling engine. Right now we're just doing artist title, and I think maybe we have the ability for sound codes.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is it comes up short, and instead of using an emergency playlist, it just says it collects up all the assets with that tag, sends it to the G selector engine, and then gets back the best songs to use to fill out the rest of the time.
And the really
And
important
then
thing to note, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chip.
I was just going to say one more thing is you also have, if timing is essential for your station, we also have stretch to ETM. So one of the things you might have noticed on my station here is some of these items have come over from G selector as stretchable. So if I've got that feature turned on and I've got an exact time marker that is also stretchable, then it will stretch out all of my stuff to meet. Right now I've got it turned off. You can see I'm over by 2 minutes, but if I had this turned on, then it would attempt to stretch or squeeze based on the settings that I might have on my station for maximum. This particular station doesn't have it, but excuse me, I can say, stretch 6%, squeeze, or actually stretch is probably the lower one, right? Because you don't want to slow things down if you don't have to. 2% or 6% or whatever you want to do here. um, to be able to get that exactly to the top of the hour.
Yeah, and
Yep.
also too with the ETMs, remind me the if you have, let's say, an exact time marker in the middle of the hour. So if you have one, let's say at 30, one at 59:59, that stretch and squeeze will respect the from one point to one point, and then the next ETM, the next ETM. Correct?
Mhm. Yep, that's correct.
And in regards to back to the tags, emergency playlist, obviously emergency playlist, if you want some when to use one versus the other, emergency is kind of the key word there versus the tags. And the cool thing about tags in comparison to local Zeta is with the ability to have tags, you have more flexibility on what those tags are because they're essentially filler music, right? So what to you is defined as filler music? Is it a particular sound code? Is it certain artists? Is it core songs? And what you can do is you can make those tags station specific. So they can be essentially a tag could be Chip FM versus Nate FM, or they can
Mhm.
just be, again, core artist, core songs that can be shared across multiple stations inside your database. But the key thing there is there's a lot of flexibility with those tags, which is nice.
Yep, absolutely.
And while we're here, Chip, to get to Philip's question, and again, Philip, no dumb questions, so feel free to share them. He was talking about, he mentioned one of his hosts likes to preview the song coming up after a set of commercials just by playing the first few seconds and then playing commercials. Within
Mhm.
Zeta, is there an option to feature that allows him to do that without having to start the song, kill it, re-cue it after the break? So I'm going to look at this, Philip. Just I'll have Chip kind of audition or preview here in Zeta Cloud. Of course, in local Zeta, we can have the audition module to preview as well. If you're talking about actual a preview, as in not necessarily audition, but as an actually kind of front sell or upsell what's coming up after the break, there's some things you can do in regards to some hooks. And I always show this in the stacks player, where what I do is I take elements, drag them to stacks, enable the hooks, and I have a promo coming up on the fly. I'll try to show you one of those videos, Philip, that we have from past experiences too. But if you wanted to show the audition there, Chip.
Sure. I just realized that Zoom doesn't let you. So Zoom has the nice ability to loop the audio into what you're presenting, but apparently only if you haven't yet shared.
Yeah, yeah.
So you probably won't hear this, but if I wanted to hear, say, John Mellencamp, RCK in the USA, I can just click audition audio. It downloads, an audition version of the audio to start listening to. One thing that we need to add to this is just the ability to start playing before it's downloaded the whole thing. At the moment, it wants to download the whole thing, but basically, when it's done that, um, you probably can't hear that, but you can see certainly that it's playing, and we've got this little dancing circle here that also shows you that it's currently playing, and you could pause and listen. And just like Zeta and Zeta to go, we have you can listen to the closing or listen to the beginning, so you can hear the end of the song, and that's a mode that's sticky. So if you always want to listen to the ending of this, a song that you want to audition, then there's that, or you can listen to the beginning.
And that too, if you, let's say you want to, save the retail space in your screen, there's also an option to hide or show the audition player. And I will say though, if you have it hidden and you want to audition something, it will just reopen that window down the bottom as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers your question, Philip. I'll reach out to you afterwards, make sure that when preview doesn't mean actual air versus just hearing off air, but we'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and you also in your arsenal have the ability to do segue listening too. So if I wanted to go through and listen to this particular segue, it's going to download all three tracks and let me listen to it and adjust and do whatever I want to do.
Fantastic. So, of course, get your questions in for Chip. We'll try to be here a little bit longer to talk about some cool tips and tricks here for Zeta Cloud. And one thing I wanted to kind of talk about next, Chip, is talk about where RCS is. Cool. Philip said thanks. Talk about how we're evolving here. And normally, obviously, in a normal world, we would be prepping for our fall NAB to showcase some new features and all of that. So, one of the things that I really took away from your first video was discussing how Obviously RCS products, we can take you from G selector and creating a log corresponding with selector to go to do that remotely. We have Acquira to go. We have Zeta to go. We have Revma for broadcast and streaming. So we can take you from point A to point B and really do that remotely as well. And so obviously when COVID hit, we had a lot of users who were saying, I don't know what I can do. And luckily we had the products to say, well, just use your to go and there you go, you're good to go. And of course, then that posed the question of, well, how do we evolve with these new remote workflows? And we talked about the conference app and Revma, how we have essentially a conference room that you can invite people to. Their microphone sources or that whatever they have based on their internet window, so Chrome, Firefox, and then also their Windows default. And so what could happen is I can create a room, invite Chip, invite somebody else. We have one, room source. It's a URL because it's a Revma stream. We take that stream, put it into Zeta. We can then run it from hotkeys, and we have that broadcast ability. If you want to know more about that, I do have past videos to show you. And then, of course, we talk about Zeta Cloud disaster recovery transitioning into Zeta Cloud automation. And just pointing out what Jason was saying earlier, having possibly the option to, obviously, if you have an FM station, that could be, we want the local Zeta to run your FM because we have, news breaks, we have multiple live and voice track users, whereas an HD2 could really perhaps, run on something like Zeta Cloud where you have multiple users. And the key thing here, too, we were talking about before, was you can voice track from Zeta Cloud, and upcoming soon, that voice track will be available in your local Zeta. And that will also bypass the requirement of a VPN because when you have Zeta Cloud, users just have their default username and password to access Zeta Cloud. I know that's long-winded, but what I wanted to get to is let's talk about some of that evolution and where RCS is going in the next couple months, how COVID has influenced some of those remote workflows, and kind of where we're planning on to be for Zeta Cloud.
Sure. So, when we started bringing the Revma team into the rest of the RCS fold, obviously we're thinking about different ways of leveraging the fact that we've got this new platform. So a lot of the stuff that we accelerated was sort of on whiteboards and in backlogs, and then when everybody started working from home, we had to pull some of that stuff off and just prioritize it because we have clients who are legitimately in pain, and we've got a lot of tools, but there's also a lot of opportunities there. And so, as you touched on, the conferencing app was something that was sort of in prototype stage last fall, and we had some ideas on where to take it. And then when this thing all hit, then we just sort of pulled it off the shelf, and we've been tinkering with it and making it better and better. And with everything with RCS, we're sort of bringing all of these things together so we can work independently. Each product is great on its own, but together you just sort of leverage this power that you can't imagine. And so the conferencing app, I just, like, before this call, got off of a planning call with the team. One of the things that's coming in the conferencing app that's going to be pretty cool is it's going from just bringing in people and getting them on air to also being able to decide which of the inputs that you currently have are actually going out over the air. So if you're in a mode where maybe you've got a call screener that's pushing some audio in there, they can have private conversations that are not going out over the air. Or you might have somebody who you've brought into the conference to go to air, but you're not quite ready for them. You're kind of building them up, so you don't want any noise or them to interrupt you. So you can choose to just have them muted and not part of the stream. They can hear you, but nobody can hear. You know, they can hear the host. The
host, yeah.
Yeah, they can hear the host, but nobody can hear the participant just yet. So they can be ready and listening. And so all of that stuff is coming. It's basically, a long-winded way of saying that we've got a lot of mixed minuses going on in here,
Hmm.
so that you can do a lot more with this tool. And of course, we can also feed the station back into that as well, so you can hear, minus the conferencing app, you can hear what the sequencer's doing in Zeta Cloud, for example, or in Zeta. So all of these things are sort of coming to help continue this momentum for work from home, which, I think for some talent, it's opened up all sorts of creative things and new things that they can talk about. And it's a shared experience that we all have right now, working from home and trying to figure out, how to do things that you used to go into an office for. And in the case of being on air, you used to go into a studio, and that was sort of one experience. But I think this working from home has sort of changed all of that, and sort of changed maybe how these shows are being put together. And so we want to create these tools that sort of help you do that. So through Zeta to Go, Zeta Cloud, Revma, Acquire to Go, Selector to Go, all of that, we're adding features to help make it easier to work. And as they become more and more interconnected, you can do something in one application and see the results of that elsewhere. For example, as if you make a change in Selector to Go, it makes its way to Zeta and Zeta to Go. So I mean, I think early on, Martin Blazek, the product manager for Zeta, did a demo of this, and it's just magical to sort of watch a change go from Selector to Go through this path and make it all the way to Zeta Go on the other side. So all of these systems are getting notification, and you can see, if you're a user anywhere in that chain, you can see exactly what's going on. And what that means is we're not stepping on each other's work. It allows us to collaboratively work on stuff like that. So that's what we're working on, is just trying to reduce the friction for these remote broadcasts. And of course, working from home is just another flavor of a remote broadcast. So when and if we ever get back to the majority of broadcasters working from a studio, you've got all these powerful tools that you can then take to a Caribbean island and and do a broadcast, as long as you've got internet. It's just you don't have to deal with back when you and I were in radio, the go-to move is an ISDN line, and
Hmm.
they were terrible then, and they're not any better today. And so it's just, the world has opened up, I guess, and we're trying to just continually keep focus on improving these tools. Again, Acquire to Go, Selector to Go, Zeta Cloud. Everything is in browsers. We're not developing a lot of native apps because of that, because if you've got a browser, you've got the functionality, and we're not subject to Apple deciding that, this API in the phone, or
Hmm.
Google deciding that this, Android API is no longer relevant, and then, causing users to be dead in the water.
And to subtly slide in Philip's question, of course, all that is done instantly. So if you're in Zeta to Go and you have an emergency or whatever it may be, you're not limited to making a change. So even though, let's say, you have a song that's 2 minutes left, you can still go into Zeta to Go or Selector to Go, whatever it is. You can make a change to the log, and that change is done instantly across the system, um, which is, again, a very powerful tool.
Yep.
So, so let's see here. So we talked kind of more about the hybrid models, talking about kind of the cloud approach to, versus native versus cloud. What do you envision in regards to Zeta Cloud on the automation front? And obviously, we're forecasting here to, Q4 and down the road. But can you give us any insight on to maybe some road mapping, some certain features that we're working on, or we're looking for
Sure. I
hot
mean,
hot gossip here, Chip?
sure. It's really a continuation of the path that we're on here. So it's making the edge player experience better. It's leveraging all the great technology that exists out of our Athens office for streaming this conferencing app. Basically, the conferencing app is more than just a conferencing app. It's really sort of the foundational piece of putting together the live parts of a radio station. So I think you've demonstrated this live stream option that we have in Zeta to Go, in Zeta Cloud, um, and that allows you to take live a stream.
Hmm.
So it's the meant to be the output of the Revma conferencing app. So the idea is that we have this decoupled thing called the conferencing app right now, which has all of your live talent. Maybe it's got phones, maybe it's got whatever, maybe they're hearing the station, and the output of that comes into this live stream, which you can control whether you're even going live or whether you're, bypassing that conferencing app. But if you're live, then you're interacting with the station that's in the cloud. And so we're just working on making that better, more fluid, to basically bring live day parts and syndicated day parts into Zeta Cloud. So it's just, more building blocks to finish out where this all goes. One scenario could be, Nate, and this is in your gossip, scenario. One scenario could be that so as you know, we've got the ability to do voice tracks now in Zeta Cloud and have them land in Zeta. That's code complete, being tested. It's pretty cool, So as you said, we don't need VPNs to do voice tracks in Zeta anymore. We don't need port forwarding. You just need a connected Zeta to Zeta Cloud. Come in, do your shift, and they will appear in Zeta without the benefit of any of these other connected. So IT folks will be thrilled that you don't have that exposure of needing access to your network. Your network accesses the voice tracks and pulls them in. So I see that extension continuing. So maybe this sequencer isn't necessarily a Zeta Cloud sequencer. Maybe Zeta Cloud UI is controlling a Zeta sequencer. So if you need to have an on-prem system, maybe, and I don't know if this is a Morty mind bender or something, but maybe the sequencer that you're controlling is not in the cloud. Maybe it's on-prem, or maybe the sequencer is in the cloud and it's controlling a Zeta on-prem. It's just we've got to work through business cases and see where it makes sense. But the idea is that maybe instead of having Zeta to go as it is right now, that you have to route into a Zeta system, maybe all of that functionality comes into Zeta Cloud, and it's your remote control surface for your Zeta system, which is like one more level of integration than where we are right now. Does that make sense, Nate?
It makes perfect sense. And
Okay.
the best part about that is again talking about that hybrid model, talking about we're now incorporating some of these facilities, but also talking about the cloud, which again, as you said, bypasses the VPN. We have our own Okta logins. We really have some flexibility here. And you start looking at somebody, and my brain goes right back to Jason beforehand. We now have the capability of, if we have multiple sites, multiple locations, or if you're, let's say, a smaller station with a smaller staff that's looking to bring in more talent, all of a sudden, it really removes a lot of restrictions in content and execution. So if we do have somebody who's remote and they want to have, let's say, voice track multiple stations, they could. If they want to have somebody who we control it from one studio. Now, of course, right now in Zeta, we can have one studio pivot across the country and run Zeta and become point. But again, the beauty about Zeta Cloud is that we're not restricting where we are there. So,
Right. It's really all about reducing friction, right? So I see friction as things that slow you down. So we're just trying to we're trying to find ways to reduce that friction, but also not increase your exposure, right? So we don't want to reduce friction to the point where we're starting to create vulnerabilities. So we're trying to do this smartly so that everything in AWS is locked down and secure. So because really, if we're shifting the ability to get into your Zeta system to the cloud, we have to maintain that level of security. We're kind of taking that on for you, so we got to make sure it's right.
yeah. I'm going to do kind of a last call for questions, comments for Chip, any kind of workflows. Philip, thank you for the kind words. We appreciate it. Philip was saying, Chip, that RCS is becoming my best friend.
Oh,
And and so we'll do last call for questions here for Chip. Of course, I'll go through here afterwards and answer some of these directly, and we'll talk about some more workflows. Um, Before I forget, I always like asking Chip users some of their kind of new features they really love. I want to get to that too for you for 1 second, but also just again more housekeeping, talking about some upcoming versions of software. Zeta 5.20.1 is a great tech update that is being released, I believe, at the end of July, if not the early August. There's a lot of great features in there. And just want to point out, too, about some of our beta users. Obviously, we have a lot of these really cool features. A lot of times, they always come from you that says, I would like to have this function or that function. And we would love to have you obviously showcase it because obviously we want to make sure it works, but also that it works to what you, the user, is looking to get out of Zeta. So just so you know, in regards to beta users, we're always looking for beta users for signing up. And again, with Zeta 5.20.1 coming out, we'd love you to try that as well. Chip, any mention on that? Anything you want to add in regards to beta users?
no, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned before we started this today, when I worked at a radio station, I was a beta tester. I always loved, getting the latest, um, and just getting it in place and being able to see what its capabilities were so that I could take advantage of things. And, many times there's new features in there that, maybe if you're in a market where you've got a user across the road that also has Zeta, or maybe they don't have Zeta and, you're already ahead of them, but, just taking advantage of all the new features to just make your station sound so much better. And, there's I think, and we've had conversations internally about, do we call it beta or do we try to call it something else? Because with some other software companies, the word beta kind of has a stigma, right? So it's like, oh, I don't want beta code. I want to wait till it's released. But I think the rigor that we have at RCS over the entire process, I've seen companies that take code that comes off of the compiler, smell it a little bit and give it to a client and say it's beta. Our stuff is so much more vetted than that. We've got a product manager who is smoke testing software before it goes to QA. Even we've got assistant product managers, by the way, on all of our products that also do that. And then it goes to QA. QA makes sure that the changes are what we said they were before we go into a regression phase where we then just test the overall product before it goes to beta to make sure that it's all, that we haven't broken anything. And then we go into the beta phase. And the whole point of the beta phase is to take that code that all of these other parts and pieces have said uh, are fine or good, and we've tested them, to put them in the field and just make sure that they work in the field as expected. That, that because we can't come up with we can't possibly know, because we don't pull client data centrally to review it and, see what people are doing. That would be, I think, probably a breach of trust. I think
Hmm.
Facebook and Google and other
Yeah.
companies are doing that sort of thing, and they're getting backlash from it, rightly so, because, what you do with your system is your
Hmm.
business. So we don't have knowledge of what every single one of our thousands of clients out there are doing with our software. So we do take input when we get it, and we add it to our, support, to our QA systems. But we don't always get input about, oh, by the way, because sometimes when we have a flexible system like this, it's capable of doing so much. People just do things that they see that are intuitive, and they do them. They don't know that that's different than,
Hmm.
than it was
The
originally
human.
designed, because
Yep.
it's a flexible system.
Yeah.
So being able to test those versions against those workflows that we're unaware of potentially helps us just make sure. And we give extra focus in development, so we allocate development time for the beta period to be able to deal with those issues. So that is the time to do it, not after it's been released. So you definitely get a lot more attention if you're a beta client. Not that we don't give everybody attention, but I'm just saying we have dedicated development resources during that beta period to deal with beta issues.
Fantastic. I got a bunch of questions here, and I told you I'd let you go at the
Oh,
top of the hour, Chip. So I'm going to try to do a rapid fire here.
no, that's
Um,
good. Good.
Philip said his weekend host has been working remotely since the pandemic. Just looking for clarification. If we set her up on Zeta Cloud, in theory, she can essentially produce, take care of her own voice tracks rather than forwarding it to the station that's ingesting. I will say this to Philip to let you know it's a lot easier using Zeta to go just because it's direct connection. The difference there would be VPN versus non VPN in Zeta Cloud. So what I would recommend for today, for right now, if you have Zeta to go, I would just voice track from there. But yes, coming down the pipeline, you can voice track with Zeta Cloud, bypass the VPN, and your voice tracks will land as well. There's also some options in regards to going live. There's also, as we said earlier, the conference live feature might be the best bet. But we'll talk about that. I'll show you some screenshots. Christopher, Mark, thank you for checking in. They just got Zeta. They love it. Question though, he noticed that the out cue wasn't on the on air screen. Scott, which is Scott Wells, our FTS team. By the way, our FTS team is up and running on sites, whatever you're comfortable doing. We do have a brand new FTS, a Field Technician Services portal. So if you want to work remotely with you and your staff, we can definitely do the Zeta install remotely as well. So he was saying, Scott recommended they put the out cue in the title, make it cleaner. Is there a workaround for the best method? There's a bunch of workarounds there. If you're looking for the out cue, you can put the title, you can put it into the sponsor field, if you will, or something like that. So there's definitely some
Yeah.
fields there you can do.
And we
Sorry,
have a
Chip, go ahead.
backlog item to make it flexible like it is in Zeta so that we can, put it whatever field you want up here. It's just, this is something we put together quickly to get something up, but certainly there's a backlog item to make this completely flexible so you can put whatever fields up there you like. And I'll also mention, Nate, yeah, I was remiss in not saying that the voice tracking from Zeta Cloud to Zeta is dependent on having Zeta version 5, which is going beta in your system. It won't work with Zeta version 4.
Thank you. Good point. Uh, Kenneth said, said, when will Zeta to Go's IVT model? So yeah, in Zeta to Go, the Internet Voice Tracker, the controlling the fade in, fade outs, and the volumes curve. If you can elaborate just briefly on that, Chip, because I know that obviously Zeta to Go will respect your trim in and trim outs with the local Zeta settings. But do you want to comment at all on the essentially what we're talking about is the fade in, fade out, the volume points being available in Zeta to go?
I'd have to go take a look at tickets to know off the top of my head.
Gotcha. The short answer to that there, Kenneth, is that it will respect in regards to at least the volume normalization, trim in, trim out, that of your local Zeta, the settings there. So if you save it, go back to your local Zeta, you'll see those changes are implemented on there. And Philip is good. We're good there. Eric chimed in. Eric was saying beta is a great way to make sure the feature you dreamed of is doing the right thing as you, the requester, has asked for it, which is always very true. Okay, so we're just by the top of the hour. Last chance for questions. Again, Chip, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it because it's great to get your insight on all of these things, but also give another perspective of RCS products and also tease upcoming cool RCS workflows as well. Again, if you're just chiming in right now, you can always view our videos, past videos on our Facebook page, rcsworks.com, and all that good stuff. And I'll leave it with this, Chip. I always like asking users, RCS users, some of their features that they find kind of fascinating if that they were in, working still as a program director or as an OM, things that they really enjoy they would utilize. So putting you on the spot, what would be a feature, and you can pick any product you want, it's up to you, but what would be a feature that you just find that would very interesting and fascinating that you want to make sure everybody is aware of?
I think, and I'm kind of coming from the perspective of a connected Zeta to G Selector arrangement, or Zeta to Zeta Cloud, in the future here. The concept of fly-in links in G Selector automatically making adjustments in Zeta is just fascinating to me as a program director. It's like, you can go in and set up these related links for things that you want to happen adjacent to other, songs or whatever, and just to have schedule changes automatically update and affect the on-air schedule. Meaning, if you drop in an In Excess song and you've got an intro that you wanted to do as a fly-in link, if it rules will allow it, it'll drop that in and it'll just on the fly do all, the stuff that you want it to do without having to think about it. And there's things in that area just are really, it's magical when you see it happen.
One of the things I like to demo is showcasing how, using the top 40 forward momentum model is essentially you create a transition so that only the corresponding dry produced pieces of imaging correspond with their song intro times. So if you have a 0-second intro, a 5-second intro, and a 10-second intro, you would play either a corresponding fully produced sweeper, half produced sweeper, or let's say a 10-second dry sweeper. It's a very powerful tool because you can essentially get all of your forward momentum scheduled just with G Selector Segue bands and then utilizing the fly-in link. So there's some videos out there that I do have, or if you want to poke me, I can easily show you some stuff there too. So again, Chip, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all those for checking in on our Facebook page. Any other questions, live at rcsworks.com or direct message us here on Facebook or comment, whatever you want to do. And thank you, Chip. Any last things you want to mention before we head out?
No, I think we hit it all. We've done it all, Nate.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next Thursday. Hopefully we're shooting for some Zeta sporting event tips and tricks. It's going to be really, really cool. And I'll see you next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Questions and answers during a time of remote workflows. Be safe. Bye, everybody.